Blog Talk Radio.
Is this what you want to be their entertainment, their plaything? Their pets? Cowering beneath the whip, and then fighting amongst ourselves. Is this what you want? I lived by their rules my entire life. I protected them, envied them, and for what? To be treated like an animal. We are not animals! We do have a choice! We can choose to be more than this!
You know, all these discussions and talks here is to see if we cannot radically bring about a transformation of the mind. Not accept things as they are, but to understand it, to go into it, to examine it. Give your heart and your mind with everything that you have to find out. A way of living differently. But that depends on you and not somebody else. Because in this there is no teacher, no pupil. There is no leader. There is no guru. There is no master, no savior. You yourself are the teacher and the pupil. You are the master, you are the guru, you are the leader. You are everything.
13 revolutionary. 13 revolutionary.
I believe that the liberation and salvation of the black nation must be brought about by black people gaining a thorough knowledge of self after our 500 to 6,000 year Holocaust, where we have lost over 600 million. And so I believe that that education process must be a process of two steps: inspiration and information. So I seriously give information, but black people are people of rhythm and spirit. So I also give inspiration.
13 revolutionary. 13 revolutionary.
Nation building from the ground up. Real topics, real people, real issues. With Minister Daweed. 13 revolutionary radio.
Come from the side where revolutionaries ride. Ancient knowledge of the pyramids held in your third eye. Ancient school of thought back in Timbuktu. Sand coat for your history, cause it all relates to you. You.
Hey, yo, Marley, man. Yo, what up, big daddy? Yo, you hear me on stage with Biz and whatnot, man, but they don't know what I can do solo. I want to feel what time to show a little something. Alright, man, I'll tell you one of my funkiest beats. Let's see what you can do with it. Alright, bet, man. Here we go. Allow me to introduce myself as the authentic, ultimate death. Now, is there anything else that I can do to describe my name? Oh, hell with it. I'm the big daddy. Crowd thrilled as I sleep, no failure as I feel. So party people as we go through. Hey, just for this occasion, tell you what I'm gonna do. Say a rhyme that you all can quote. I guarantee that you'll agree to this like dope. Cause all I have to do is pick up the mic and live from New York is Saturday night. And yo, I wanna see you on the floor and go for what you know. I'll endure to give you more or just enough to keep you on the dance floor. I rule parties consecutively to put a posse so much in effect it'll be second what the party needs. And then you know a brother likes to change off with the rhymes that I display. So let the music play. By the way, all the party people that came to attend, if you wanna get busy, this is what I recommend. Get on the dance floor and
Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, King and Person, Master Prophet Muhammad, I bear witness there is no God but Allah. I bear witness that the Honorable Muhammad is his last and greatest messenger. And I myself can never thank Allah enough for raising and giving me, and my teacher, the Honorable Minister X. I greet my brothers and sisters of the Blog Talk Radio family at large with the green words peace and assalamu alaikum. It is my pleasure, my humble honor to be here again to come on Blog Talk Radio and to have the esteemed guest that I have and the organization that I'm having today. You know, brothers and sisters, the idea of a nation within a nation and a nation of our own is an idea that's rapidly catching fire amongst a lot of people. And I believe that the discussion should be had. I believe that we have the right to have the discussion. It is my position that even though we may live in our own world and think that a lot of people think like we do, a lot of people don't. A lot of people think religion first. A lot of people think social issue first. A lot of people think finance first. And they don't really believe that the answers to black people's problems start with building something that black people can draw from, something that black people can use to govern. And so my thought pattern and my heart have evolved over the years because I think that when you say nation, that word is kind of big for a lot of people, but a lot of people don't understand the idea and the definition of what's called infrastructure. They don't actually know what it is to have your own government, to have your own power system, to have your own sewer system, to have your own, basically men and women who have the skills, the abilities, and the craft, and are good enough and dedicated enough to their craft that when, in fact, you say, okay, I need this done, that you could mobilize qualified black people to do that. I think a lot of people don't understand that. So I think that in a lot of ways, we are jaded about this idea because we are looking at the reality of it. And so many of us say, well, black people ain't never did nothing. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Well, we're going to get into this topic and the meat of this topic on this show, and hopefully, God willing, have a whole lot of other shows talking about this. But like I've been saying for the last year, the topic and the idea of nation building starts with a discussion. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about it. We got to plan it. We got to come together and do it. And then we have to get about the business of either locating and recruiting and or developing, homegrown, and inspiring young black men, young black women to be a part of this idea because, we'll get into all of this later, brothers and sisters, but the reality situation is that this is good. This organization is good. This show is going to be good. The brothers who will be speaking today, from what I see, is going to be Brother Earl, a brother that I've known for a little while, a brother I love and respect, has a great view of what it is to put together that which we need. Brother Holicism, a brother that I admire greatly and have followed a lot of his YouTube posts and have known him through College Genesis for a while. And speaking of which, our brother College Genesis will be here also, and he will be chiming in on the situation, a great warrior in the cause of repatriation, a great warrior in the cause of infrastructure and skill development for black people, and a huge advocate for us acquiring land and do something with our land. So I want to let you know, brothers and sisters, before we get into this, that we don't have no dummies on this show. We don't have no brothers and sisters who's just talking out there behind. These are men and women, basically men, but I believe there's going to be a sister from our group called Shay, I'm not sure, that's going to call in. And these are men who have seen some things, these are men who have done some things, and these are men who are successful financially in their personal life. But they have gone through the ups and downs in the diaspora of America and seen that it's really very, very almost next to impossible for us to live stress-free and grow as a people amongst the people who are outwardly friendly to us, but inwardly and infrastructure-wise hostile to us. And we have to really, get that through our heads. And so, therefore, with that being said, one at a time, I'm going to open up the mics and talk to the brothers and let them in. And also, I want to let you know that also a very near and dear friend of mine and a brother I respect, who has been also dealing with this subject vigorously on his show, Chef Robin looks like is here. So here we go. Caller from the 860.
I'm sorry. I'm just listening in.
Okay, fantastic. What's your name, brother?
Jesse, calling from Connecticut.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I hope you enjoy the show, brother. And if at any time you'd like to ask a question or chime in, please hit 1, and we will honor you. Okay?
Sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, brother. Caller from the 901, which I believe is Brother Earl.
Hey, what's going on, Mr. Daoud?
Yes, sir. Everything is good, brother. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing real good. Looking forward to this show. It's been a conversation that's, I guess, a long time coming. It's been
right.
And actually, the momentum has probably been building up for 2 or 3 years. And it always take it back to that 2012 mess. And I said, maybe people misinterpreted what was supposed to be going on. And it seems like, you know, I'm not into the Mayan calendar and all that, but it does seem like that collective conscience of everybody in the world thinking that there was going to be a shift in what was going to happen on this earth has had an effect, because it has been some dramatic changes since that time on the direction this thing is going. So I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Fantastic, and I am too, brother, and I'm glad you're here. Let's see. Caller from the 347.
Peace, brother.
Caller from the 3. Oh, peace, brother. How you doing?
I'm fine. This is Mr. Holipsism.
Yes, sir. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Okay. Let's see. Caller from the 302.
Yo, peace, man.
Peace. Who's this?
This is Smack.
Hey.
Okay.
What's up?
What's up, Smack?
Date. What's up, man?
Fantastic. Okay. And this, of course, is Brother Chef Rob. You with us?
Yeah. Hey, brother. How you doing? Greetings, everybody.
Brother. How you doing?
Peace,
all
Chef.
Right. Peace.
And finally, let's see. 757.
Yeah, it's your brother, Carlos Genesis. Hello, what's up, brothers?
Peace, Carlos.
Everything is good, brother. Everything is good.
Doing good.
Okay, so, Brother Holism, would you like to set it off and let everybody know what time it is?
Yeah, actually. I want to talk a little bit about how the concept of the BAIO even came into existence. I was hoping Brother Tim would be in, but I don't think he's called in yet. But actually, it was a conversation that me and Brother Tim had, and it started off actually very modestly. You know, like one of the things that we discussed is that there was no real structure inside of America for black people. Like there's, you know, black people are just like a leaf twisting in the wind here. It's like we have neighborhoods that we live in, but we don't control them. We have nothing to do with the economy that's going on in the places that we live. We're just there to basically serve as like cogs in the wheel.
Right.
So at the time, police brutality was the issue on the table. Like, I mean, it still is, but there were like some high-level cases that were going on. And what me and Brother Tim decided was black folks needed to have a way to monitor and control their own neighborhoods.
Right.
So what we did was we said, well, if we were to develop some type of organization to do that, what would it look like, or how would it operate? And then we started checking out organizations that was already in existence, like the Detroit 300 and certain groups in New York that was operating on a really limited basis, but the concept was there. Like you would have brothers who would patrol the neighborhood, like at the subway stations and stuff, from let's say 6:30 to 9 or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's how it started off. It's like just very modestly. Like we were just thinking in terms of domestically. And then the conversation, you know, like as time grew on, we started thinking more internationally and thinking about looking at things systematically in terms of what was affecting our people. And that's when the whole concept of just infrastructure in general became like the highlight and the point. Because, you know, like you've said, and like I've said in my videos and stuff, the problem is that we don't think like landlords. We think like tenants.
Yes, sir. I've heard that video. Yes, sir.
And when you think like tenants, you have a very limited scope of responsibility. Because it's like if the average tenant, you know, you come home, you just want to make sure your lights is on, your water's working, and the heat is on or whatever. That's all you're concerned about. Now, if the heat is not on, you have a problem, but you ain't really going about the process of getting it fixed. You're going to bitch and moan and complain to the landlord until he does something about it.
Right.
But you, in terms of you actually doing something about it and fixing it yourself, you're not concerned about that. Because it's not your responsibility.
Right.
And that's basically just the metaphor for our existence here in America. It's like we have to start, and when I say we, even when I say we have to, I'm not talking about everybody. I'm not talking about every person in the black nation has to be involved in this discussion, because obviously that's not the case. I'm talking about the people who have been through this struggle, the people who have been the ones who's talked about this situation and understand the ins and outs of where we are, who we are, what we've been through, who our enemies are, what our obstacles and everything is. Those people, the people that I consider the think tanks or the intelligentsia, they need to raise the elevation of their discussion.
Right.
And I believe that with me and Kala and certain other people, that you definitely, I got to give you mad props, because you're probably the only person that's doing this.
Yes, sir.
The only person is doing, like these type of shows, I don't see anybody else doing it.
Yes, sir.
You know, I mean, most people are talking about social issues. They're talking about historical issues, like what happened in ancient Kemet and what happened in, ancient West Africa or North Africa, whatever. They're having, philosophical discussions and stuff like that. But nobody's talking about the really, really important things, which is controlling the context that we exist in. You would figure that would be number one on the docket.
Right.
You know? So once you start getting into that conversation, then the issue becomes, all right, land. All right, well, where do you obtain this land? Do you want to obtain this land in America? Do you obtain this land on the African continent, somewhere else? If you obtain this land, are you going to be operating under an indigenous nation where you're just basically there as a settler? Do you want land where you're independent and sovereign? What type of government do you have? What type of form of governments do you want to have for your nation? These are like what I call big boy conversations.
Right.
And the only way that you can have these type of conversations, you have to have brothers who is thinking like that, thinking like owners, thinking like controllers, not thinking like, like I said in one of my posts that, look at me, Mr. White Man, I can eat, drink, and chew gum just like you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Like I'm not interested, and it's not just, and I don't want to get into the whole white man thing because you know how I feel about that, but it's just like with everything. I'm not concerned about another ethnicity. I'm not concerned about being equal to them. I'm not concerned about I can do it just like you. I believe that there's only one nation on the face of this earth that should be able to compete with us once we get our crap together, and that's probably China.
Right.
That's it. Anybody else should not even be a problem for us.
Right.
And that's the level that you have to have brothers thinking on, that where they controlling their own reality and actually running and operating and having impact on this entire globe. Now, you're not going to hear that conversation from a civil rights person.
Right. Right.
So, you know, that's basically just an overview of what the whole BAIO is all about. It's about the establishment of us, the establishment of a we, and the establishment of an our. Because right now, us, we, and our does not exist on socioeconomic and political level.
Right.
When we talk about we and us and our, we're talking about vague abstractions, nothing tangible. So the BAIO, and I don't even like to call it an organization because organizations are limited, but the organization has the vision of what the nation is supposed to be about.
Right. Right.
You know, and basically that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, thank you, my brother, and you know, very well said. With that being said, the conversation that we're having today, I believe, is African infrastructure or African American infrastructure. Is that right?
Right.
We're supposed to be discussing that. So, Mr. College Genesis, did you want to chime in on that particular topic?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brother Holder. You know, great opening. Exactly what he was saying. You know, we have to define who we are, what we have, who we are, and how. The what we, who, and our never really existed. The only thing we really have in common is the fact that we're all killed, catch, and hell. That's about it. You know, and what happens is, like, Malcolm X, like I said, people, like I said, really need to really go back and really listen, pull up Malcolm X books and get a couple of his books here. The last book he ever wrote that was published in 1990 called his last speeches. Those speeches were hidden. But his last speeches, like the last 5 days before he died, you know. And basically Malcolm X said that this is what transformed me into the way my thinking right now. He said, look, anything you do in the context of America is going to lose. You know, it's going to fail. Sure. Now, let me get back to what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to talk about the infrastructure. Malcolm X was very critical. He made a claim that Elijah Muhammad about the South, right? He said he was disturbed that the Nation of Islam didn't do anything in Birmingham when those girls got blown up in Birmingham. And he said, well, we should be down there. And the Nation of Islam top official refused to let him go to the South, right? And then what happened was he had learned that the Nation of Islam did have members in the South, but they basically made some secret alliance with the Klan saying, we'll leave you alone, you leave us alone, and you guys don't be involved in the civil rights movement, right? And then they said, okay, there was some land in somewhere in Georgia that you could have this so-called black nation in. And Malcolm X said, well, I didn't want anything to do with the Klan in George Lincoln Rockwell area, so I didn't go along with this neo-Nazi Klan joining together with black nationalists. He knew that was tainted in the organization. This is my point. Malcolm X said, look, in the context of America, there's one group of people that has all the power. That's the white man, right? He's the one that's calling the shots. This is what happens. Okay, black people, we see you unifying, you're doing all this, that, and the other thing, but let me go ahead and pick some of you off, okay? You know, let me put Bill Cosby on prime time with I Spy. You know, wait a minute, see, black people, things are getting better. You know, black people, you see black people on prime time. You see, they'll show you a picture of a black man in a high-profile position in the government. See, things are getting better. And so what that does is say that one group of people, with just a stroke of his pen, could basically manipulate whether you go how strong your movement is or how weak your movement is, because we don't control the context where we live in. Now, if you tell somebody, yeah, we're going to struggle, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then they're saying to themselves, well, I got a wife to feed, I got a family to feed. You know, what is the struggle doing for me? And then you say, well, we can't. It's just about the cause, about the cause. The white man is going to make sure he's going to come along with just enough jobs, just enough opportunity, just to neutralize you, or give you something else to play with. He'll give you sports, he'll give you drugs, he'll give you dominoes, he'll give you whatever he needs to do to make sure that you look at these movements and say, you know something, that ain't really worth the time. Everything's gotten better. So 40 years after the 60s and Martin Luther King, we really have nothing to show for it. And that's exactly what happened. We basically took what little crumbs that came from the table, and we thought that was progress. Now we're in a situation now where the same white man, Malcolm X predicted this, that one day he wasn't going to have the jobs to give us. Now what you see, what Holt was talking about the other day, where Brother Holt, you can come back and tell us about this, where they said they're going to compete with in the Pacific Northwest. They said you're going to be competing with wages from China. What was that you was talking about? Tell us about, Brother Holt.
You're talking about the trade agreement?
Yeah, trade agreement. So you tell us about that for one brief second.
Yeah, I don't have the info in front of me, but basically, if you do a Google search, on the term 90% of American wages cut, that's what they're saying, that 90% of Americans, their wages are going to be cut 50% because of this trade agreement.
Right, and also we had NAFTA like 15 years ago. So we have NAFTA, we have an influx of Mexican workers competing. So we're living in a world where they can bring labor from overseas. They can do all the stuff like that. You have China being the main manufacturing base for the United States. So what I'm saying is this, though, it's disingenuous for anybody to put anything other than national before us, because even the people that we used to deal with, used to be the white man had power, you know, but he doesn't even have that power himself anymore. He can't even provide for himself anymore. So how basically are you going to basically tell somebody you shouldn't talk about nationhood, you shouldn't talk about your own infrastructure, and then what are we supposed to do? Well, we're all Americans. Oh, suddenly when the ship is sinking, they want us to sink with it. You see what I'm talking about? We don't control the context of the thing. So in other words, let's sink with America. America's going down. You know, you got all these countries emerging, the BRIC nations. You have China, you have Japan, you have the EU, you even have Mexico emerging now, Brazil. And so we have all these countries emerging now, and these people are going to be producing all the semiconductors, the fiber optics, and all the technology and all the stuff like that. You have Africa growing now with this middle class growing and everything. Most of the billionaires, black billionaires, are not in the United States. We only have one in the United States. The rest are in Nigeria and other different African countries. So ask yourself this: how did Nigeria produce billionaires? They control their own infrastructure. Yeah, they have problems, but yes, they control at least the context of what they live in. The problems that they have are theirs. They can solve their own problems because the problems are themselves made. We can't control anything in Black America, like Chicago, anything like that, because we don't control the context of where we live in. So I get annoyed when people tell us, do something about this crime in Black America. I would like somebody to tell me all the shootings that happened recently in Chicago, what the heck are we supposed to do? We don't have an army. We don't have anything to give jobs to give anybody. We don't have anything. What can we do if we don't control the infrastructure? We don't do anything. And it seems like white people are going off into their gated communities and everything like that, drinking their nice latte and everything, and champagne. And they're saying, the hell with the rest of the working class, black people and everything. That's what you have right now. So basically, anybody who tells us what we're doing is wrong is either a liar or really, 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 really evil. Because everyone knows that the bottom line is this: Black America, we are on our own. So we're at this point now, we're in the defining moment of our history. Either we're deciding now, what are we going to do for the next 20 years? Are we going to spend it doing what we've been doing, talking about a bunch of nonsense, doing absolutely nothing, standing on the street corner? Or are we going to basically get together, put our minds together, and say, you know something? If we basically had our own land, it won't be easy. Whatever is easy. But the bottom line is this: we'll at least have hope, a future. Because our future will be the first time in 400 years of destiny will be in our own hands. Success or fail will be in our own hands. And so people get scared. They're like, oh, geez, I don't know. Well, the bottom line is this: if you study like I did, and all of us do, you would know, yes, this is very possible. And not only that, it's very easy. Hope and I talked the other day. It would probably take 10% of the energy we spent on civil rights and all the stuff you're planning on doing to get your so-called justice in America. 10% of energy to build our own independent nation. And not only have just a nation, but have a nation that's basically probably richer and more prosperous than any other nation in the world. We can do that. We can do that.
Well,
Hold on a second, brother. Let me get some other opinions here. And again, I really appreciate your opinion, and I appreciate what you're saying. But let me just get some other opinions, because I think Brother Earl has a different take on this. Brother Earl, what is your take on African infrastructure or African American infrastructure?
Well, the thing that I believe in is it's like this. It's like I'm a studier. I study like Garvey, like like most people. And the thing that gets me is like I agree with what Colin's saying, that when you get in America, you can get bogged down in BS. And the BS is going to come from other black organizations attacking you, getting involved in the politics of what the white man thinks about you or your organization or what you're going to do, and all that. Mm-hmm. But I am of the belief that we cannot abandon the people that are here. Mm-hmm. And I know that some of our people are really, really messed up. But we have a lot of people being born into terrible situations. And they feel, and they have no escape route. And that's the one thing that got me. And I remember, I think I was watching that Zeitgeist movie, that little thing, and they were showing about the research about how living in a violent environment affects people starting in the womb. And I mean, okay. And it got me to thinking that how many black people in America ever have a peaceful moment from the time you leave your father's, do you ever have peace in this country? And I mean, when you go, you never have, there's nowhere for you to escape. There's nowhere for you to go where you can see black people doing anything of any positive value on their own. There's always somebody begging, marching, looking for approval, or something like that. So that's why I believe that you have, now I understand what Colin's saying, and I understand what he means. And believe me, I don't think that we have some kind of, where we're going to build something within the United States that's going to, without a reflection in Africa. That is impossible. However, right. I think that we have to establish something here. This is where we are. And, whether we want to believe it or not, we are not the same as continental Africans. We have had a 500-year different history that has established us as a different people. We are related, but not the same. And as that, we need to have a place where we can have people that share our same history that can come here, and I'm just going to put it out as an example, that you can have a place. I'm not saying it's going to be a Black Wall Street, but that would be something that would be nice, but something similar to that, where you can have a place where you can have a place where people can come from. Like if you are in Chicago, if you're a single mother in Chicago, there's a place for you to go if you don't want your kids to be in a shooting zone for the rest of their lives. Right. I don't care if you got to hoof it there or whatever. You might come, and I'm not saying everybody gets in. See, I don't believe in that. I don't believe everybody gets in. There has to be a way of qualifying. And the thing about it, America has kind of built in this system where you can put this together. And the thing about it is, I think that you got to have a place here where people can have a place to get their heads together. You have to have a place where people can, to learn skills that are in terms of nation building. Because if we're just out willy-nilly all in the United States spread out, people are not going to learn skills in the form of nation-building skills. They're going to get skills in the terms of feeding themselves.
Right.
And it could be.
Let me say something.
Hey, can I say something?
Hold on. Yeah, we got to get Brother Robin before.
Yeah, man.
I just want to get everybody to say something.
Yeah, because I'm just 2 points, because there's some things that you said that I disagree. I travel halfway around this planet. Okay, so let me get that out there first. First off, I don't think that anybody on this line and what the brothers are talking about abandoning the people that's here, I don't think that's going to happen. They still going to have ties and care about what's going to happen over here. But when you talked about that 500-year history, ours being different than theirs, the brothers and sisters in Africa they're under the thumb and rule of the whites that are in Africa. They're their ancestors in America. So we can't go ahead and throw that out the window. We need to go ahead and recognize that we in the same struggle. Their struggle is just like ours. It's just a different a white man that's just born over there, just like the white man that's born over there. We can't go ahead and throw that out the window. So we have to go ahead and look at, hey, look, we are all one family, and quit that little division thing that I hear from a lot of people, that them over there don't like us over here. I've been over there, and I didn't see that when I went over there. It's just the ones that I see that come over here to adopt that mindset that they're different. Okay.
Yeah, so
right.
That's true.
Let's throw that all out the window. Go over there and go ahead and when I hear people go ahead and say that they don't like us over there, another question I ask them is, hey, look, you take your pen and your paper and your clipboard and you ask every brother and sister over there, do they not like us? Because I hear that more from over here.
Most Africans always wonder, why the hell don't we come over here? That's what I get.
Exactly.
And if they don't like African Americans, it's because we choose America over Africa. That's what the problem is.
Because because the blacks over here choose to go ahead and stay in this system and choose to go ahead and accept.
That's where the tension comes in. You know, where people like, well, wait a minute, you're at the bottom of another. We don't see. This is one of the things we have to get back to. You know, one thing we have to get back to, right? We used to be considered up into the 60s, up into like around the 1980s, a minority group. People forget what that really means. What it means to a minority group. When a person says they're a minority group, what that means is they recognize that the social political infrastructure is controlled by a white majority, and you're a minority group. So a minority group, by the UN definitions, gets special treatment, special rights, special protections, and special things. You know, as a minority group. What happens is we have these Uncle Tom leaders. And even some so-called black militants, I'm shocked, who keep insisting on calling themselves Americans and keep doing all the stuff that we're Americans and all this kind of stuff like that. And so as more and more American we get, we lose that minority mindset, you know. And what happens is we just basically think that, let's just go integrate into America. We're all Americans and all the stuff like that, you know. And I just sick to me when I see this stuff. Now, on one hand, this is another thing. We'll listen to this very carefully. The people in the nationalist movement, right? You can't expect people to say, if white America and everything is telling them, we want you to be part of this country, whatever, well, they always take the best of us. We take our educated, they take the ones that are black people that they like, that they find acceptable, and they can integrate and stuff like that, and they leave the rest of the black people that they don't want in the ghetto, you know? And so that's what happens. So basically, if you want those black people with the education and everything like that, and also, like, they're facing racism, and they're basically like, they feel like, oh, geez, man, I'm out here, but I feel alienated. I feel like, I'm conquered and defeated. I'm not part of the ghetto. I'm not part of the hood, and I'm not part of this white culture anyway, because the white people at any time could take what little gains I have away from me. So that's a quagmire. But those persons that live in the suburbs are not the white, black or any. We're all the same. We're both black in the same context of America. The problem is this. If you want people to be nationalists, right, the educated black people will join nationalist movement if you have a real plan. You know, if you're just going to talk a bunch of stuff and make a bunch of noise, they're not going to listen to you. But if you have a real plan, they say, wow, gee, these guys are negotiating for 10,000 square miles, you know, and you got like 5 countries lined up to give them lines of credit to build. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to have black people coming out of the woodworks, you know, from top MBAs to Harvard. The ones that sit the whitest, the ones in the whitest world will come and join you, because they know that with black people, with their own kind, they can rise as high as they can. That's the reality. But you basically got to offer them something that they can say, they can walk away from America. That's why I tell people all the time, we have to raise the bar wholesale. We have to raise the bar. When you're talking about nationhood and nation, you're putting yourself, you're directly challenging America. You challenge America. You can't take every black person over there. Everybody's going to get to the promised land. But you do need pioneering force. You do need leaders. You need brave people. You need strong people.
Brother, let me chime in, brother, and give my point of view, if I could.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, I don't want to cut, because everything you're saying, brother, I agree with. I want to let you know that. But, you know, I just want us all to enter in our points and then sort of mix it up. You know, for me, and most of you know my story, you know, I'm a man that came up in the Nation of Islam and loves to teach on Elijah Muhammad, loves the Nation of Islam construct. But and I was talking to one of my elders the other night that I had on the show. My problem with organizations, black organizations, have always been that they tap into the talent, or not just tap into the black men and black women in the neighborhood, in the hood, in the ghetto, and we're cleaning them up from drugs, alcohol, uncivilized lifestyles. Once we clean them up, the only thing that we are doing is putting them back out there to regurgitate our project and lift us up. We're not developing the talent and the skill in the black man or woman, and a lot of organizations are discouraging this. And this is why I went on like a year, like tear, just basically terrorizing black organizations, you know, specifically religious ones that are supposed to be militant, because they have talent at their, you know, at their disposal, but all they're doing is running a plantation. Basically, somebody is a slave master at the top, and you have middle-level managers, which is whatever responsibility that you may gain once you grow up in the organization, and they're responsible with whipping the slaves and making sure that they give their money, they give their energy, they give their time, they give their family in order to so-called build the organization. However, men and women grow older, and they don't have anything, no kind of a stake. If you were to say, okay, we're going to go over to Africa, or if you were to say, we got land over in Tennessee, Georgia, wherever, most brothers and sisters, the only thing they could probably do is pick up a rake and farm. They would not be able to, you know, basically participate in what we're talking about now, which is infrastructure, which is running power, which is running information, which is running piping and sewage and stuff like that. So my theory, my particular angle on this particular topic, which I love this topic, and I'm so glad that all of you brothers are here talking about this because we need to, is that for me, I do believe, and you've bent my ear over the years, because originally I was like, nah, we need to do something over here, we need to do something over here. But I will give an example. Each one of us at one time or another has worked for the white man. Each one of us have done our best to do the job that we've done under the white man. And by working under the white man and doing our best, we still was basically passed over for promotions. You know, at some times our manhood was challenged. At some point we went home stressed and was so stressed that we either wanted to cause problems in our family or fight somebody on the street. I believe that this particular problem and dynamic will happen as long as we participate in American infrastructure and not black infrastructure. So that's why me, as a quote-unquote black Muslim, is in favor of A, teaching black people to get these skills, and B, trying to do it here or someplace else, because I know that even if you get the skill and you try to do it here in America, eventually the white man will make it so hard and stressful for you that you will never, ever be able to live in peace and do what you need to do for your people. So that's my angle, that has been my angle, that's going to be my angle. I do believe that we need, and I'm kind of on the side of Brother Earl, I do believe we need some kind of, you know, like the NBA has the regular NBA and the development league. I think we need some kind of shadow or satellite kind of pocket organization or pocket community here in America. My only problem that I hope that we can hash out is how will we do it, because I don't know if any of you are familiar with what happened to Dr. York over in Atlanta. Are you familiar with what happened to his property there,
Yes.
what they call Tom Ray?
Yeah.
You know, they came basically and raided it and took it down. Mm-hmm.
Also,
so
H. Brown. Remember H. Brown? I forgot what he changed his name to. But what happened was, you know, he was set up. Some deputies came there, served the warrant, and got his thing. And next thing you know, guns were flying and everything. He was almost facing the death penalty. You know, he tried to build his thing in Georgia, you know. And he said, saw some beautiful land, I'm going to build these things. And the people were like, that ain't happening. Now, at the same time, when have you ever seen them go up against drug dealers and gangs and try to put them out of business like that? No. But if you're a black Muslim or nationalist or whatever like that, I already know that. I already know if I ever tried to build everything like that in America, that's exactly going to be another Waco, Texas, or Ruby Ridge. The same thing. If they did that in Waco, Texas, what do you think they're going to do to us? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. And also,
okay. But there's one thing I want to say. Oh, go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I was saying that I think that a lot of the things that we want have to be demystified. Because you look at, let's say, I'm just pick an ethnic group like the Koreans. I don't see any Korean president running for, president of the United States. I don't see a Korean nation state inside of America. Yet, on a socioeconomic and political level, they're a powerful group.
Right.
So a lot of things that we like when we talk about how we can do something here, I think it's like a false dichotomy that people make a lot of times, where it's a this or that. Like either we all in mass go to Africa or we all in mass stay here. It's not. That's not realistic. We're here. It's both. It's foreign and domestic policy. Every nation has foreign and domestic policy.
Right.
So and also when you look at nations like, let's say, Israel, where they have a strong presence over here, but they also have their own nation state there, and they also interact and do business with each other. One of the things that I would like to know is, like, because there's a lot of people that are just pro-America, like they say, well, we need to do things here, we need to develop a nation here. My question to them is, okay, if you do that, you're going to have a few problems. One of them is you're going to be surrounded by white folks, on your nation. Just logistically, that doesn't make sense. Also, if you're going to have a nation on American soil, what are you going to use as your currency? Like, what are you going to use to trade with other nations?
What's your borders?
Where's your airports? Where's your seaports? Where's your trucking? What are you going to use to interact? What are you going to use to interact and trade with America? Because since you're in America, that's the logical nation you're going to be doing trade with, and other nations outside of America. How's that going to work logistically?
Mr. Holder, and I think you need to define that thing about being surrounded by white folks, because that means that they got their eyes and ears and nose to the ground. So any movement that you make, they own it.
Well, I'll just use Black Wall Street as an example. Look at how prosperous and thriving that was there in Tulsa. But what the problem was, you don't have an army. You didn't have a way to control and protect what you had. So you were basically at the mercy of these people. And so I look at stuff like that. We got to look historically and say, well, is it the best strategy to get a few states in the South and be surrounded by the American government? I mean, look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing to all of these other countries overseas. I mean, they have this thing called drones now.
Look at what they're doing to the Indians in this country. I mean, look at the Indian wars. I mean, they're surrounded by white folks.
That's what I always point to too, because I always hear that argument. When I say what I just said, I always hear that argument, and then I always want to point out to people, what about Gaddafi? He had separate land. He had an army.
40 years.
He had. Okay.
All right, what I'm saying is this. Let me say something. Let me get my thought out. Let me get it out. What I'm saying is this: that you guys think, it seems to be the consensus when we talk about this, is that you're going to be able to go to Africa and even having a presence here, and you're not going to have the same problems as you would if you were establishing here. This is not. Hold on. The person that I know everybody saying we're going to be surrounded here, but the thing about it is, it's a global thing. History also shows us that although you will be. Hold on. Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. Although history shows us that we will be surrounded here, history also shows us that in Africa, you will not be surrounded by the white man. You will be surrounded by every other people in the world. I mean, if you read The Destruction of Black Civilization, you will understand that you are surrounded in Africa also. And although you are on African soil, Let me school you on Africa. I'm the person here and knows all about the continent. You know, the whole history of the continent. I'm the person, Africa 101, your brother Kyle will tell you all about the continent. And let me tell you, first of all, you mentioned Gaddafi. First of all, Gaddafi was in power for 42 years, right? And Gaddafi was overthrown, right, which I agree and disagree with, that basically there was people inside his country, you know, that wanted him gone. Simple as that. And it was a battle between Gaddafi loyalists and rebel fighters. The rebel fighters were fighting. They had Gaddafi pinned up. Gaddafi was going to use slaughter master people, and all NATO did was just aid the rebels to top him. But it wasn't like they said, you know, let's get rid of Gaddafi. You look at the Arab Spring. All over the Arab world, what you see right now is Arabs overthrowing people that's been in power for 40, 50 years. That will happen in our country. That will happen anywhere. Anytime somebody decides, I want to stay in power for life, you're going to have people going to say, I beg to differ. It's simple as that. Anytime you got young men in the country, and they basically feel, for whatever reason, that they want to rule, they want to make decisions and everything, and you marginalize them and you don't give them the voice or Democrat thing, you're going to have war and uprising. That's been like that since the beginning of history. It's going to be like that for 5,000, 10,000 years from now. So anybody can tell you that Gaddafi's day was going to come. Anybody could have told you that. You know?
Hey, let me say this, Caleb, because I add to what you're saying, Brother Earl. The American influence, the African American influence, is already in Africa. So it's just like what Caleb was saying. It was like some forces from the inside that helped go ahead and bring down Gaddafi. If you go ahead and you pay attention to young brothers and sisters that's already here from Africa, they imitate the brothers and sisters here already, and there's already brothers and sisters on the continent that's imitating what's going on. So we have a presence there already. It's not like foreign invaders coming to Africa. They already know about us. So right. the door is pretty much wide open for us to come on in and go ahead and get involved in this.
Now, the only question, and what Rob's saying is, when we go there, right, the question we want to have is, should we, now in large numbers, right, should we basically just go there and just live and assimilate into the countries, or should we basically have our own territories which we govern? I believe that an independent nation state starting out front would be impractical, you know. But I do believe enclaves, territories, provinces, and stuff like that, that we govern, that we basically, if we're living on land, why should we have the right to say, okay, we want a street built here, or well, we want this port built here, we want this city named here. We should basically control the infrastructure, or the tax revenue. We should basically have a tax revenue department. You know, we should be able to have our own public works minister. And
I mean,
like
the Koreans do that as we speak. Other groups do that as they speak. You can go ahead and go through. I'm in Chicago, and you can go ahead and see them. They got towns named after Korean leaders. I mean, I don't understand the writing, but I know damn well that that's dealing with some Korean folks. So that stuff's already done over here. So you know, the same thing can happen over there, because this place, over here, a lot of brothers and sisters over there on the continent are influenced by what's happening over here already.
And then World X is telling me that in Ghana, you got your little African-American town over there in Accra, you know, a whole with shops and everything, a whole African-American community in Ghana right now, you know, with houses and everything is thriving, you know. And like I said, Liberia, you know, we're building houses in Liberia, and other countries in Africa. I talked to people that said, look, man, what are you guys waiting for, man? You got a whole continent here. Come here. Zimbabwe, we just found out there. I talked to Mr. Roosevelt today. And he said, yeah, and we talked about the situation in Zimbabwe that this is another thing. I want to ask you about. This is another thing. We are not allowed to really do anything in Zimbabwe because the United States has sanctions on Zimbabwe. Now, we're offered land, mines, farming, everything that we can't really move on because the United States, the European Union is lifting its sanctions on Zimbabwe, but the United States, under a black president, is holding on to its sanctions on Zimbabwe, which is illegal and racist. You know, and so the bottom line is this. So the context of us dealing with our brothers in Zimbabwe is controlled by Washington, D.C. So if we had our own nation state and we had our own diplomats, wouldn't we want to deal with Zimbabwe without having to worry about what Washington's saying? That's just like being living in your parents' house. Your parents say, I don't want you hanging out with such and such, such and such. You say, I'm going to move out.
I think that's different, more different than that. Just like what Mr. Holicism said about the Israelis, about the Jews. I mean, the Jews are around the planet, and they got this little land based on, you know, some paying off people, but they got heavy influences over here in America and voted into the elections over here and voted to what's going on in Israel.
But Israel is the base. Israel is the central point. You know, they influence the United States, but Israel, the state of Israel, is the worldwide Jewish thing. Just like Italy.
It wasn't always their base. Just like we don't have a base.
But Jews didn't get power. And you know what? The funny thing about it is, the idea of a state of Israel for Jews wasn't even accepted by Jews. Only 10% of Jews agreed with having a state up until World War II. The idea came from what the Jews saw black people doing in Sierra Leone and Liberia. Edward Wilmot Blythe, the founder of Pan-Africanism, was a friend of Theodore Herzl, influenced Theodore Herzl to write his novels about Jews settling in the Palestine where they could be free and do themselves, you know. The idea he got from of a modern Jewish state came from the idea that black people from the West were settling back in Africa, like Liberia and Sierra Leone, and building their own state. So he had the idea, why can't Jews do the same thing? And the idea, the propaganda behind Zionism came after World War II. Oh, we got to do this because of the Holocaust. That was Jewish propaganda. The Holocaust wasn't as going as it said, but it worked. Because most Jews wanted to be German, they wanted to be French, they wanted to be this. They had no intention of forming a state of their own. You know, and many Jews around the world still reject the idea. They're hell bent on being American, they're Canadians and everything like that. They don't want to be Jewish. They want to fit in wherever they're living in. But the Holocaust, the people who are the Zionist propagandists say, yeah, if you don't, you know, we don't have this homeland, this will happen again and everything, and it works. It seems that black people in America, no matter what we go through, no matter how all the hell we go through, we still don't think that we need a sanctuary for ourselves. I don't get that.
Well, brother, hold on a second. Let me I want to ask Brother Holicism a question about infrastructure, the Black African Infrastructure Organization, but I want to give Brother Earl a little bit of time. So I'm going to mute y'all for a second, and I'm going to let Brother Earl speak, and then I'm going to ask Brother Holicism a question. Okay, Brother Earl, give me your angle. Give me your whole angle. You got the mic. Nobody's going to interrupt you.
Okay, the thing that I was trying to tell people, was trying to get out, was that I understand that you have to have a base in Africa. I'm not crazy. I understand that. And,
right.
and it seems like we talk about the Jews, but we're not looking at exactly what they did. And they did not, their first move was not to try to get, their first move was to try to establish a footprint somewhere. They didn't care, Israel was not the first choice. Argentina was the first choice. And they wanted to establish a footprint. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about not going and doing something in Africa. I'm saying that you have to have something here. You cannot, there is not going to be enough people. It's like Colin said, it's going to be accepted by about 10% of the people anyway, at most. That's at most. And those people are not going to be fit to go to Africa and build any damn thing. What are you going to do? You're just going to all show up and start a country? That doesn't even make sense. You have to have some kind of recent history of governing yourself. And if you cannot govern yourself amongst yourselves here, why do you think it's going to be possible in Africa just because you're in Africa surrounded by black people? That doesn't even make sense to me. And it's another thing, when we talk about history, we have to understand the history of Africa. Africa as being the country with all the resources. We know this. Everybody knows this, though. And everybody is scrambling for those resources. It has been since the beginning of time. And if we if we read the destruction of black civilization and understand exactly what happened about how Africans became in this situation because they were constantly at war with invaders. You got invaded from the east, north, south. Everybody came. It's not going to be just the white man surrounding you. It's going to be everybody. When you establish your country and you start trading amongst African nations and you start building that up, you're going to be surrounded. I don't care how, if anything history should tell you is that one thing everybody in this world agrees with is that Africans do not have a right to live on a level that everybody else is living. Everybody agrees with that. China agrees with that. The Latin Americans agree with that. Everybody agrees with that. No matter what they say out of their mouth, nobody comes to the defense of Africans without getting something for themselves. So what I'm saying is you have to have some kind of base where you are. I mean, you cannot just, and I know we're not saying abandon the people, but you can't abandon America. And it perplexes me that every other country or every other people can say, well, it doesn't matter that America is here or somebody's here. This is where we're going to establish ourselves. This is what we're going to do, and that's just our plan, and we're going to execute our plan despite the opposition that's going to come. Because whether you're here or in Africa, there's going to be high opposition, high and intense opposition. At least in America, and I say this, they have to have a pretense of following some kind of rules. When you go outside of the American borders, they don't have no freaking pretense of following any kind of rules. They don't have any pretense. You just don't hear about what they're doing. And to say that it was just all of a sudden that once Gaddafi started trying to have an independent Africa, that all of a sudden his people rose up against him when they had one of the best living conditions in the world, is asinine to me. Why? It's like American people rising up. The reason why American people rising up, despite the hell that they're catching, is because they're comfortable here. And quiet as kept, our living condition is nothing what the Libyan people were getting from Gaddafi. You could say he was a dictator and he ruled for 40 years or whatever you want to say, but he was using the resources of the country. Yes, he was getting rich. And anybody in power, in rule, is going to get rich, no matter where you are. But he was using that to help the people also. And if you think the people of Libya, I don't care if they're pro-Gaddafi or anti-Gaddafi, prefer what they have now to what they had 5 years ago, it doesn't make sense. America did not go over there to assist the rebels. They went over there to destroy that nation so American corporate interests could have another place to set their foot in. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing that went on in Egypt. It's the same thing that's going on in Syria. It's the same thing that's going on everywhere. They are in a competition not with the Arab nations. They're in a competition with China, and they are running game with China. What we have to understand is that I understand where we are, and I understand, and I know I'm not as experienced as a lot of people, other people on this phone, but it seems that we are missing some valuable lessons that we say that we read and we took in. And the thing that always got me is in Destruction of Black Civilization, when Chancellor Williams was breaking down how Africans were forced to move constantly because of all the wars. And every shoreline in Africa was under constant attack for years and years and years until we ended up enslaved. And that's kind of what I wanted to say is you have to have a different perspective. And it seems like we have settled on a certain direction, and we think that that's the only direction you can go just because Black Wall Street got blown up. That doesn't make sense to me. There have been plenty of nations in Africa that the United States government has overthrown. And if you think that we're going to get over there scot-free and not getting any opposition from America, it's going to be just as hot there as it is here for us. And that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Okay. And I thank you for that, brother, because, remember, this is basically a discussion we're having, and we have point and counterpoint, being African infrastructure or African-American infrastructure. So I wanted you to be able to get your full point out so that we could take these ideas and begin to deal with them and take them apart and see what we need, what we don't need. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong, but everybody has their opinion, and you do have a right to your opinion. So at this time, I want to bring on my brother Holism. And brother, I want to ask you, because you have the organization, Black African Infrastructure Organization. And that means that you are planning, through your organization to lay down some kind of infrastructure, because we know that infrastructure is the common denominator, regardless to religion, regardless to culture, regardless to whatever. Everybody uses infrastructure. We do agree with that. Everybody needs infrastructure. So can I ask how the organization is going to address this, and give you also a platform if you wanted to address some of the counterpoints that Brother Earl brought?
Well, actually, that's what I wanted to do first, because he said some things that I think that there's a lot of, and I'm glad we're having shows like this, because it gives us an opportunity to clarify things.
Right.
When people say we need to have something over here, I don't think that there's an argument about that. Like, I've never heard me or Kala say, well, no, we can't have nothing over here in America. That's not realistic. We live here. You know what I'm saying? I've always come from the position that wherever we live, wherever we dominate in terms of numbers, we should have a socioeconomic and political infrastructure in that area.
Right.
So when people say we're abandoning America, or we're not thinking about having something here, my question to them is, when you say have something here, what do you mean? Because if you're saying we should have our own nation state here in America, I have to say that's delusional, borderlining on crazy. These people couldn't even. Barack Obama went through hell trying to pass a health care bill.
Mm-hmm.
They can't even put together moderate gun control legislation, and you think that they're going to give 3 states to African Americans? That's a fantasy. And my thing is, why is it even necessary to have 3 states for African? Why can't you just simply control the areas where African Americans live right now? If we dominate in Atlanta, Atlanta should have an infrastructure.
Right.
If we dominate in Detroit, Detroit should have an infrastructure. So I don't understand, like, this or that dichotomy. This is a false dichotomy that keeps getting raised every time we talk about nationhood. And I keep going back to the other ethnic groups in America. America is like a flea market. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's just filled with all types of people coming here to do trade and interact with one another. The only problem is that it's like black folks are at the flea market and living at the flea market too. We don't go home to anywhere.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And what we're saying is we got to have a base of operations. Now, of course, just because you have a base of operations doesn't mean that you don't have infrastructure in the places that you dominate with in numbers. So I really don't understand this dichotomy, and I would like to have Brother Earl respond to that, because I want to know when he says we got to have something here, is the here that he's talking about looking different than what I just described? I want to visualize what he means when he says we got to have something here, because as far as I can see, we're talking about the same thing. If we're in I'm going to use Atlanta as an example. My idea of an infrastructure in Atlanta is us controlling the infrastructure of Atlanta. We dominate in numbers there. Ain't nothing but black folks there, right? Majority.
Right.
So we should be controlling that area, controlling that socially, economically, and politically. Now, how does he see it any different than how I see it? Because I think that we're on the same page, but we're just saying it in a different way.
I do too, and I'm going to bring him in. I want to ask you one question though, and then I'm going to bring him in. I basically articulated my particular mission, which is to try to be a teacher to influence brothers and sisters, younger brothers and sisters coming up in the black organizations to think like we think. And I know a lot of y'all think that that's completely impossible. A lot of people think that. But I'm wondering what you think about that particularly, because I haven't spent time in organizations and knowing the mentality and knowing the whole, basically slave-master-slave mentality. Do you think it's a viable use of energy to attempt to influence younger brothers and sisters that are coming up in, let's say, whatever organization that is out there that I may have contact with people? Do you think it's a viable use of your energy to try to get them to think the way we think, which is gear yourself towards infrastructure? Because the way I look at it is, You know, and I use war history sometimes because I'm a big-time military historian. In World War II, the person that they constantly give you is this George Patton character. And they said George Patton did this, and he was this flamboyant cowboy, and he rode into Germany and all this other stuff. But what they never do is give credit to those generals who sacrificed being on the battlefield to train the men that would help Patton to drive into Germany. That's my passion. My passion is I believe in everything that all of us are talking about today on this radio show. I just believe we need more people thinking like us. So I guess I'm looking for your opinion.
Not only is it viable, it's crucial. We have that's part of to me that's part of the infrastructure that I talk about is well, you know what? I'm going to give you a personal story, and this personal story is going to answer this question directly. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but just to give you some personal history about who I am and what I've been through.
Sure.
Back when I was in my teens and when I was in my 20s, me and my cousin and my nephew and a few of my friends, we used to go to Bushwick Avenue in Brooklyn, where when Dr. York was in his heyday in Brooklyn, where the Ansar Allah community was there.
Right.
We used to go to the Nation of Islam meetings. So we were talking about the Lost Found Nation, the nation under Farrakhan. We used to hear the Five Percenters. We used to hear the Hebrew Israelites. And in the process, this is when, you know, as you're young, you're trying to get all this information in, soak it in, and try to find out what's the truth.
Right.
And in the process of doing this, we discovered something. This just being young and being naive, we said, wait a minute. How is it that when you look at all of these doctrines, and I'm talking about these religious organizations specifically, when you look at their doctrines, all of them seem to agree on who the enemy is.
Right.
Now, how the enemy was created and how this happened, they all have their variations of all of that. But the bottom line is, all of them tend to say that this guy that we've been having all these problems with is the problem, and we don't need to be dealing with him. So us as young people and being naive, we said, well, if that's the case, that's the common denominator amongst these groups. Why aren't these groups in communication with each other? Why aren't they working together to try to do something to fight against this enemy that they say is the enemy of our people? And then, you already know where I'm going with this.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Because by doing that, by naively thinking that, they ended up educating me much more than I ever intended to be educated. Because what I discovered is, see, a lot of people still to this day, and God bless them, I love them, they got good hearts, they honestly think that these organizations are for the good of our people. And I'm sorry, I hate to burst people's bubble, but they are not. The game that's going on in these religious organizations is no different than what's going on in the streets with people selling drugs and carving up the community for their own little control. Everybody has their little hustle going on, and they don't want to get together on any level. What they want to do is, if you got your hustle over here, I'm going to leave you alone. Just let me get my hustle on over here, and we're going to operate and carve this community up and get as many people as be a part of these organizations, and we can all live and we can all eat. And that's it. So if anybody is looking to these religious organizations or these whatever organizations thinking that that's the key to our empowerment, you are very disillusioned.
Right.
You are disillusioned.
Yes, sir. Without a doubt.
Because that's not what they're there for. Those organizations are there to maintain themselves. Now, keep in mind, I don't attack them. I don't believe in attacking them. But what I will say is I don't think that I'm out of line in calling it like it is.
No, without a doubt.
Because I'm using where we are at right now as my proof. You mean to tell me that if the white man is the devil, which is what everybody seems to be on the same page with, you mean to tell me that you can't get together amongst God? What's the problem?
Yes, sir.
You know who your enemy is, and you got these people who are suffering socially, economically, politically. The police out here killing us wholesale. And nobody, at no point, did any of these groups say, you know what, let me sit down. If I'm with the 5% Nation, let me sit down with this brother from the Hebrew Israelites. We need to get together and control this community and protect our people.
Right.
Nobody came to that conclusion.
Right.
So my thing is, I don't believe that I am Mr. Holistism is so brilliant that I just got up in the morning and came up with this by myself. I believe that this energy out there that I've been putting out has been out there, but I think that there's been a calculated effort to squash it out and keep the community the exact same way that it is. So when we start talking about looking to these organizations, that's the problem right there. That's the problem. I don't care about these organizations. I care about as much about these organizations as they care about me.
Right.
But what I do care about is all, because, and this to show you the hypocrisy of it, let's say you're a black man in America. You can go and join the Nation of Islam, stay with them for a year, quit them, go become an Hebrew Israelite, stay with them for a year, quit them, become a Moor, stay with them for a year, quit them, become a 5%er. You can go through all of these groups, and nobody asks you for no DNA test to find out whether you're a Hebrew Israelite. You know what I'm saying? Whether you were Moor.
That's true.
They will take you and they will accept you as a part of their membership. Why? Because you're going to give them your energy and you're going to give them your time and you're going to give them your resources. So that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And if we're going to change that, we got to have an infrastructure where we teach our children practical knowledge. Because my thing is, science and mathematics and physics and stuff like that gives you practical skills. Things that you can, and this is to build on what you were talking about, you can take those skills and you can go somewhere and you can be self-sufficient. And this is the one thing that these organizations do not want us to be. And that's the reason why you came to that conclusion. And I applaud you for it, because that says a lot about you. Because a lot of people don't come to that conclusion. They go along and just follow and accept whatever these groups put down as being what it is, and never come to the conclusion like, wait a minute, I'm still broke. I've been with this organization for 20 years. The person who's leading the organization is doing pretty good, but I'm broke.
Right. Yep. Yep.
It's not about self-sufficiency. But when you have a nation, first of all, there's that separation of church and state, so you don't even have to worry about this religious stuff, because it's not about that. It's about the infrastructure, and it's about the people in the community. Everybody, when I look at my people, I don't look at them as Hebrew Israelites. I don't look at them as Muslims. I don't look at them as Christians. I don't look at them as atheists. I look at them as black African people, all existing under the same umbrella.
Right.
So what do I want for them? I want my Muslim brother to be walking down the street and not have to worry about being shot. I want my Hebrew Israelite brother to be walking down the street and not have to worry about being shot. I look at my people like we are, as a global people.
Right.
And we got to have the conversation and build around that concept.
Absolutely, brother. And I might add to that, my father, because, I just like you, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. And my father had a locksmith shop on Fulton Street for 22 years. And I can remember, because my mom and my pop split up when I was 8 years old, so I lived with my mom, and my mom worked at a bank or whatever, so I had to deal with, that side of commerce or whatever. My mom did what she could do, and she was pretty successful in the bank. But when I used to come to your side of Brooklyn, because I'm from Coney Island, when I used to come to your side of Brooklyn and stay with my father would take me around in the car, and he would say, you see those projects over there? I put, locks in there, and you see those projects over there. I put, a buzzer system in there. And it started sinking into my head. He said, listen, son, he said, you want to be able to be dropped in Russia, Germany, China, or whatever, and have the ability to make money. All you need, you may not know the language, but you know that you have a service that they need, and they can use you. You can make money. You can deal with them because you have a skill, because skill is a universal language.
Right.
And that particular idea, as I grew older and hit the streets and, played around for a little while, was dormant. But once I started struggling with the economic side of my life, my spiritual life was fine. You know what I'm saying? I got off drugs, I got off the streets and stuff like that. But once I started struggling with the economic side of my life, that seed began to grow and it came up again. And I realized, what am I doing here? Why am I working fast food and just giving to the organization? Why don't I try to invest in something that is universal so I know? Because, listen, brother, and I posted this on my page the other day. Somebody had some kind of picture, and I'm going to bring Brother Earl in a second. Somebody had a picture, and it was 2 General Motors keys. And I looked at the picture, and I could tell the people, this one is an ignition key. The cuts on this key is 44222321. This is a door key, and the cuts on this is 2231, whatever. That's my skill. I could look at that across the street and tell you these are the keys. Like I could look inside your car. If you lost your car and you left your keys on the seat, I can literally look through your window, read the cuts, go to my code machine and make a cut, get into your car. And that's not something that is inhibited by language, religion, politics, or culture. And to me, that's why me, you, Collar, Chef Rob, and Brother Earl connect, because we're speaking a language that is universal, that has not a damn thing to do with no religion, has nothing to do with no organization or culture. We understand that we as a people have, some of us, not all of us, but some of us have fought for that which I was just talking about, and we're doing it for somebody who don't give 2 craps about us.
Right. And I just want to add on to that and say this and ask, a question to everybody who's listening on the radio and the brothers on the panel. When you look at that black African child being born out of the womb, do you say to yourself, I really want that child to be a Hebrew Israelite? I want this child to be a Muslim. I want this child to be a 5%. Or do you say, I want this child to be a mathematician. I want him to be an engineer. I want him to be a scientist. These are the questions that you got to ask yourself, because we're dealing with a lot of things that, like I said, are irrelevant to the discussion, and we're giving groups more power than they and more bite than they actually deserve. Because in my world, what your religion is your business. If we teach our children the STEM fields, and let's say one of those kids becomes like a top leading scientist, but he decides that spiritually he's a Muslim, fine. That's his decision. That's her decision. Right. That's nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with the nation. That's a personal decision that you make. If you want to go and learn about Islam, learn about it. Nobody's stopping you. You should be allowed to do that. But the nation is not concerned with that. The nation is concerned with the welfare of the people inside of the nation. Food, clothing, shelter, protection. Right. I want to be able to exist in an environment where I don't have to walk down the street and have to watch every little thing that I do to make sure that I'm not offending somebody so that I don't get shot. Right. Right. That's all I got to say for now. And I'm with it. Brother, listen, I should have met you a long time ago. That very same thing that you said, I said on my show. I forget which one it was, but I said it in a different way. You remember, because I think you're in your 40s, and I'm going to be 42 this year. Right. But you can remember when we were younger going to school, and they used to have, remember when we were younger, they used to go to school, and they had come up in front of class and say, my father, my mother does this for a living. Mm-hmm. I remember, I said this on my show, it was a couple of shows ago, I said, most of y'all would like your child to say, my daddy's a Moor, my daddy's a Muslim, my daddy's a Christian. I said, and that's sorry, because if I was a teacher, I would say, is your daddy a Moor when you're hungry and broke? Is your daddy a Christian when you're... I said the same exact thing. I just got finished saying that on the show. Yeah. I said, what I would like you to say is my daddy's an engineer in the Moorish Science Temple. My daddy is a electrician in the Nation of Islam. And to me, that's the way my father taught me to think. I'm proud of being in the nation. I'm proud of everything I've done in it, and I will stay and continue. I believe that that's how I make a difference. However, I would use the teaching because I was a captain, I was a lieutenant, I know how to train men, and my wife knows how to train women. We would use that teaching differently today. We would use that training in order to train brothers and sisters to acquire that particular skill so that they could, they could become that engineer in the nation. They could become that scientist, that kind of thing. To me, that's what is missing. Brother Earl, your mic is on mute, brother. Did you want to respond to Brother Fuller's question?
Well, it's like he said. We are on the same page, and I'm not talking about establishing a separate nation state away from the United States. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you're going to have a community.
I agree 100%.
You're going to have exactly some kind of community in which, and I think what we're going to have trouble with is if we try to initially start establishing a community in a major city. I don't think that's feasible. For the same reason why you guys don't think it's feasible to start a nation state in the United States.
But brother, can I just inject something? I don't want to interrupt you, but I just to build on the point because I don't want us to go backwards. Let's go forward. When you say start up in another city, we're already in the cities. We're already physically in the communities that we are in right now. So what I'm saying is, when you say we need to do something here, are you talking about getting up and going somewhere else, or are you talking about dealing with what we are dealing with where we are at right now?
In a sense, I think we're going to have to, somebody's going to have to get up and move and go somewhere else, yes. That's what I believe. I don't believe we can all be spread out. I don't believe you can have everybody, 2 or 3 people here, 2 or 3 people here, and have a virtual meeting. I don't think that's the same. I think eventually you're going to have to be uncomfortable and move. You're going to have to make a commitment and move, or establish something. Even if it's nothing but,
we did that.
Even if it's nothing to do.
We did that 100 years ago in the Great Migration. Black people, we've been moving, like Apostle Roger said. He said, man, we've been running and hiding and moving and migrating since the end of slavery, And if you look at Black history, it's all about search for the promised land. We go to one place, we think we got the promised land, and guess what? The same problems not only follow us there, but they'll seem to be waiting for us when we get there. So why? Because we do not control the context of any place we go to.
Can I ask a question, Carla? And this is to everybody because I'm a little bit confused, and maybe I just want to give y'all what's in my head, and you tell me how I'm incorrect or how I'm wrong. I'm in New York. I'm in Brooklyn.
Right.
You have certain brothers that's in Atlanta or whatever. Now let's just use Atlanta. I'm going to use Atlanta as an example. Black folks are already in Atlanta. Black folks dominate Atlanta. Why do we have to get up from Atlanta and go somewhere else? Like, I don't see the contradiction in trying to clean up and take care of where you are currently living, and still having a group of us. It's going to be a very small group, by the way, who serve as ambassadors to try to get something started on the continent as well. I don't see it as a this or that, or we got to do all this at one place. Why can't we do this at the same time? And how is it contradicting each other?
Wait. Let me do this real quick. Okay, a couple of things. Okay, what you just said, Mr. Holland, I get that. And one thing is also when you talk about like ambassadors, especially to some Asian countries and then some other countries, a lot of times they go within that pool what's already here. Like if they want to go ahead and get a Hispanic ambassador, a lot of times they go ahead and they'll pull a Hispanic that was born in America. Okay, and they'll do the same thing. One thing I don't see that being done is with a lot of African countries because I see that somebody being white. So that's being done. They pull individuals together. We already in these cities, and it's time to go ahead and pull those people together. And to deal with something that Earl keeps putting out is about abandoning America and making it seem like, hey, look, I'm gonna get off this radio show and jump on a plane tomorrow and go ahead and fly to the west coast of Africa. No, I've said for a long time, and Carla could back me up, that I've always said we need a training facility. Okay, we need an area where we can go ahead and train and do some stuff. And that's the only way we're gonna go and do anything, because you got to learn about the different languages that's there, the different cultures of the people that's already there. You got to learn where you're going. Okay, you don't just go up and pull up. So you have to have a training facility and train and obey.
We need, like I said, like I've always said, Rob, listen. Before I'm going to talk about the benefits of having a nation state, even if it's just like a small percentage, like we all agree, it's only a small percentage right now, right? And first of all, the first thing is, we're talking about a pioneering force, pioneering people. We already did that. Some of us may have been the first people to move into an area, and then a lot of other people move behind that, come behind us. You're a pioneer. You say, okay, I'm going to move to this neighborhood, brand new neighborhood, whatever like that, and brand new stuff. You're a pioneer. That's just what the pioneer does. He goes out there and goes on the new frontiers. My point is, why do people have a problem when we talk about going off the American plantation and pioneer? That part I don't understand. We can be a pioneer, we can go every place else, but just as long as we don't leave the United States. I want to know, does the United States have chains on us? Is there some law that I don't know about that says, we can't leave any place, we can only live in these, the short-to-short mentality, as Langston Hughes once called it. Black people have a short-to-short mentality. In other words, white people are the dominant force in America, so of course, this is their fortress. Of course a white person say that, but yet, white Americans live all over the world at all times. They go to Australia, they go to New Zealand, everywhere you go, there's white American communities everywhere, all over the globe. You'll see white Americans in China. They lived there for 200 years. They live, white Americans in Russia. White Americans that live in Africa and everywhere. But the only group of people that people expect to stay confined to the shores of the United States are black people. And we're the people that the least benefit from Americanism. We're the people that basically, on the bottom of America, and to be honest with you, we're the least likely out of any group of people in America to have ever traveled on a passport, So this is what I'm talking about, a mentality, When we talk about nation state and territory and everything, we're saying we're putting what we're doing, our context, on a global system. Because that nation state or that territory we will control what goes on in there. Nowhere in America can you say black people are making decisions where the telephone lines are going to be built. Black people are making the decision who gets the import license. Black people are making a decision who builds this right here, who builds the railway. Black people, how many shares of this stock of this corporation, who gets the investment or whoever like that. All the things that goes on in America is not in our hands. But in the context of an area that we control, we have the power to do that. Now, let me tell you the benefits of a nation state to the people that stay in America. Wouldn't it be nice if black farmers had a market that exclusively caters to them? Let's say if you're a person who grows chicken feed for a farm, and we in our nation state, we're growing chickens, okay? Now, would we basically be hostage to, let's say, a British company that want to import? No, who do you think? We could say, no, we're going to give our brothers over here the opportunity to export to us, and everybody else is going to pay an extra tariff. Those are things you can do when you control the context of what you live in. So it's opportunity for both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Right now,
instead of being squeezed out of markets, we'd be creating our own markets.
We're creating our own markets, and we're a $1 trillion economy. If 1% of us left, we would start off with $1 billion economy, just starting off. Just by going over there, building settlements and everything, houses that we already have in America, just on the same level that we have in America. We would basically be already on the level of the rest of the world, overnight. That's just starting off. It's not included as more and more people say, yeah, I want to come and everything. Now you say, well, some people say, well, you can't. Some people can't go because they have nothing to contribute. Hey, that's the challenge. Now you can go to somebody and say, hey, look, you want to be part of this and everything? You want to be a farmer? You want to be this? You want to be this? Get your skills. Go to school. Take 4 years and get your degree. Get your skill set and everything. And you say, well, what about people who can't? Well, hey, if you got a brain, if you can sit down and listen to a Hotep less than 24 hours a day, you're going to roll yourself in a vocational college and get yourself something done,
Oh,
this is what I'm talking about.
Colin,
yeah.
I just want to say this, too, just to build on what you're saying. You can name any country in Africa, and I can give you a person here in America that's an expert in it.
Right.
We have a small group of people that are really into African culture, and they know the language, they know the history, probably better than the people that's living there.
Right.
These people, we have an ambassadorship already in place, but the problem is we don't have a structure to utilize it.
We're not bringing anything to Africans that they can use. Anything that they use. Africans always say this. They say when you come over and everything. They say a black person in America. One thing about black people in America, we're very, very resilient, and we got to hustle enough and everything like that. Especially brothers from New York. You know, anybody from New York knows we got that in us. We just, you know, we see opportunity, we're going to do it. You see brothers in New York, I know brothers in New York lived their whole life, never have a regular job, but they always got money, legally. You know, they could do this, they could do that, they could build this. Yeah, I'm doing this. Next thing you know, they got homes. I own this building over here. Oh, yeah, this person right there, I got a contract to do this. They're just rolling. You know, I got relatives like that in New York. You know, they like that. You know, so bottom line is this. If people are ambitious, you know, they can benefit. But the people that don't want to do anything and are lazy and everything, you can't let a few people and say, you know, we can't do them because they're going to be left behind. Well, the bottom line is this. In all situations, you know, if somebody's smart and he's ambitious and everything, yeah, they're going to thrive. If somebody don't want to do anything and everything, they're not going to do so well. But at least you should be able to do that in a context where you see people that look like you that are making it. Then you have no more excuse to say, well, geez, you know, it's the white man system. So a lot of us use the so-called, they'd rather stay in America and talk about oppression than to actually really look at this idea of doing something for themselves. Because
and let's address the pink elephant in the room is that the reason why we have so many people that's unproductive and not doing nothing is because this is what our system manufactures, which is going back to the nigger manufacturing machine.
Yep.
If you don't want to manufacture Negroes, then stop having a nigger manufacturing machine.
Yep.
Create a machine that manufactures productive people. And then we won't even be having this discussion of leaving this one behind and this people not being involved. Right now, we're just producing them on a consistent, out of the womb, we are producing dysfunctional Africans.
Yep.
What's wrong with us creating a context where we can produce functional Africans, people that are self-sufficient, people that are intelligent, people that are critical thinkers? You can do that if that's what the goal is. But if your goal is to pimp people, if your goal is, and like, oh, let's go back to Gaddafi. It's Gaddafi's fault what happened. And you know why? Because he didn't spread the wealth.
Right.
We don't need you being in control for 40
That was a lie that his country was doing. Let me give you an example.
40 years? Are you serious? 40 years?
No,
before you say something, Colin, let me just say this. The reason why the United States holds elections for every 4 years, it's not because they're so enlightened or more than anybody else. It's for their own self-interest because they don't want to get killed.
Yep, they know that.
4 years and you out of here. And if the people want you to be there another term, you'll be there for 8 years. But no more than that, and you are gone. No 40 years, so one person there trying to be king and be Scarface for 40 years, and then you wondering how the people overturned you?
And they're going to say it's the West. Come on, that's the biggest lie. Let me give you an example. Also, people don't understand something. George Bush and Condoleezza Rice opened relationships with Gaddafi in 2004 and 2005. The American companies have $50 billion invested in Libya, you know, and they basically. So why would it doesn't even jive with the logic in that? Why would the West basically invest $50 billion in Gaddafi, normalize relations, say all to after me Scotland, say forget all about that. We want to invest in Libya, and then turn around. Why? Because the people were not getting any benefit from that. They're like, yo, look at all these Americans in our country, and Gaddafi's making all this money, and all that. What he give us these little peanuts and a little apartment, a little chunk change here, and we're supposed to sit back and let it be ruled by this for 40 years. That's what happened. It don't matter. See, people. It doesn't matter how much you give.
That was a small drop in the bucket compared to what they want to go ahead and get later on. Because I spent time in the service that we're in the world's policemen and all that old crap I was fed, you know, and I saw that stuff and I was like, man, we ain't got no business doing none of this shit. You know, it's wrong.
Yeah, but the thing is, my point is this though. But Gaddafi was doing business with America though. You know, Gaddafi was like
not like you think. It was setting them up, and it was getting people on the inside to go ahead and get inside information. A lot of
maybe so. But why was the Libyan stock? You see the Libyan stock market? Libyan stock market was up there. You know, they had all these companies, American companies from Halliburton, and all these people had boots on the ground and everything like that. And that basically that coup and whatnot destroyed all that. You know, so all that money's lost. Now and the whole thing of Benghazi is the fact that they're trying to recoup what they lost. You know. Now, NATO was the one that said, yo, look, let's get rid of, let's put in and help the rebels and whatnot, you know. But America was like, yo, they would have been happy to keep Gaddafi in power. You know, it was NATO that did that, you know. And it was just Barack Obama just took the scale and said, okay, we're going to help the rebels, you know. But he didn't do that because he wanted to. It was like he had no choice. It was like, wait a minute here, we're going to if a history book's going to be written. What are we going to say? If it was George Bush in power, who do you think what would happen right now? If George Bush was president, Gaddafi would be still in office right now.
See, this is
and that's the truth.
This is why I say, hey, look, that training camp, that training base, that facility, whatever you have, we got people in all these cities. You have to go ahead and have one.
Right, and I agree. I agree with.
Let me finish. When you go ahead and have that, you can go ahead and deal with what's happening around the world. So also studying the different languages and the people in the culture. I mean, you have to go ahead and do that. So that's my thing. Also, addressing this to Earl real quick again is, hey, look, I don't think other people I don't think what these brothers and I'm not saying that. I agree with nationhood, nation building. For me personally, being over there already, hey, I leave this place if I can leave tomorrow. If I can leave, I'd leave because I don't want to come back. Over there. So I wouldn't mind going ahead and bringing some brothers and sisters over there with me because I already know what's over there and I know what to connect with. And then I think that's the part that you missing, that hey, look, it's not just people just going and making this up without doing any research or going ahead.
Yeah, we're not just doing that. We already have people in Liberia, right now, in Ghana right now. It's happening. The only question is, if we're going to do this kick it up to the next level, should we basically go for politically? Right now, it's a political thing. Now, we've already known that, okay, there's a connection there, this, that, and the other thing. You got a lot of African Americans visiting the continent. You got some people settling there, but most of the people settling there are retired people, and they live in communities in Ghana and Ivory Coast and Nigeria, places like that. And so the whole thing is this. There's such a trend with black people saying, something, I would like to buy land over in Africa and live in a black country. You got black people living in South Africa doing really well. Becoming millionaires, getting into business, doing very well. And the bottom line, one of the reasons why they say they left and everything, they said, look, I left because they tired of living in a majority white country, and they feel that, if they're going to have, and I'm not saying all the problems that are going to disappear. Yeah, there's ethnic tension between African Americans and Africans, but they'll rather deal with that than deal with a situation where you can never really integrate into American culture and American society. America was never really set up for an alien race of people to just sit here and not be a part of the society. Every other people, you ever notice how there's no other people that have a civil rights movement and everything? Why? Because until they actually face racial discrimination, most other races ignore it. They let us do all the heavy lifting. The Asians and all the other people, they don't march and everything. They just suck all the benefits that black people get out there and fight for. We're the only ones that really believe we can change America and make this a place that for everybody and all this kind of nonsense.
Well, they don't.
People that believe that.
They don't need to have a civil rights movement. None of that silliness and that nonsense. Right now, they got things together where they can go ahead and they can buy whatever they want. Okay.
Yeah, they're
like this. And so they buy.
They're like, well, if it don't work, I can go back home.
They buy politicians right now. So I've been having a conversation with this Korean dude this past 2 weeks, and he was telling me some stuff about here in Chicago that I didn't know existed here. I thought it was more on the West Coast, or maybe even more in New York, on how the Korean contingent here has really got a real strong foothold. I didn't know they had that here, because I've seen it in Los Angeles, but here in Chicago, man, they don't even they just pretty much snap their finger and go and say this is what they want, because a lot of the imports and all of these little crazy knickknacks and all that stuff, a lot of stuff come from China, but they go through South Korea to get here. So these guys got money on top of money, so they can get whatever they want.
Well, let me just add to this, because we talked about lazy people earlier, and we talked about people who may not want to be ambitious enough to add to infrastructure and things like that. I remember a little while ago, I was completely against the factory mentality, because I had come into some information, and the information that I had come into condemned the whole factory mentality of you just pulling the lever and being in the factory all day, like you see Eminem and 8 Ball do. However, as I always say, doing what I do, I travel around to various different cities, putting in cameras and electronic security, and everywhere you go, man, you see black people there pushing carts and, or sweeping the floor or mopping the floor. And the thing about it is that the reality of the situation is if you talk to them and say, hey, don't you want anything better than this? 1 out of 10 or 15 will say yeah, but the other 14 will say, man, this is just a job, man. I'm getting ready to go home, smoke me some bud. And So the reality situation is that when you put together infrastructure, I do think that you have to account for factory, i.e. mindless work, because there's still going to be some black people who really just want to separate from the white man or from America or whatever, but they really ain't trying to be in no damn lab. You know what I'm saying?
Look, brother, I agree with that. Like I said, I'm drawing up the blueprints right now for a nation, state, or territory, province. And I'm gonna send everybody a copy of it when I'm done, in PDF file. And I allot for that. There are going to be people that basically are what I call just the average rank and file, and they don't do nothing. But there's always going to be work for you to do and everything like that and everything. But the thing is, those who are ambitious and everything like that, you're going to thrive. And the bottom line is this. The reason why the brothers think like that is because, hey, they have nothing to measure themselves by. If everybody you know is doing the same thing, just work my little job and smoke my weed or whatever like that. But if they're around people that basically you go around, but what do you do? Well, I'm a logistics specialist. And they say, well, you only, 21? Yeah, man, I got my certification and everything. I'm making 50 G's a year. I'm going over here. I'm getting ready to do this thing in Kenya, too. They're like, Dad, you traveling? You got making that much money? Well, what do you do? That's what I press upon them, Right now, especially here in the South, most of the people who do have those type of lucrative jobs and everything like that are white boys. And it's almost like a given when you go to a job site, right, a big job site, the white guy, he's making like $80,000 a year. And we talk about this, right? The black people are resigned to the fact in fact, they lower black people's wages deliberately so they can basically attract white people to the area and give them high-paying jobs.
Let me make this point real quick. Okay. I feel that look, we need to work on prevention of that whole thing. Education would prevent that, so you don't have individuals going ahead and looking. This is just a job. And this is why something else I go ahead and push. When you go ahead, I talk about education. I mean, start pretty much when they start to breathe, damn near, is to go ahead and try to educate them on what's going on. Try to go ahead and get them to go ahead and deal with reality and what's going on in the world. And that's again.
Rob, to add to that, Rob, is the fact that if you're talking about nation state, when somebody's living in a nation, when you wake up and you see that, wait a minute here, if we screw up, it's all on us. You look around other countries.
That's still a part of the education. Because me being a chef, I've worked with individuals who come from other countries. They start teaching them how to cook when they're 3 and 4 years old. Okay.
Rob, what point I'm trying to make is this: when you have education, people have to have models of success that they can model themselves. They got to be a part. You got to be a part of something. If people feel like they're a part of, why can't we take that same dedication that we have when people join the Nation of Islam and stuff like that, and people use that to motivate themselves to do work and build their families and everything like that? It's just all about priorities. The only time we basically are going to do this is when we join these organizations, or we join the military, or we join the white man, or we require them to do all stuff like that. Why can't we basically say, hey, look, we're going to require you to have the same attitude as that? Why? Because we want you to be the best you can, and the best you can is work hard and do stuff like that. You have no excuses. You can rise or you can fall, but it's all up to you now. When you do that and you see people and you basically hold people accountable and say, look, this is what we expect out of you, and this is where our expectations are and everything, that will basically work. And I believe, like Hope said before, it's the environment we live in with producers, like I said, the nigger manufacturing machine. We don't have to. We know that, the problems and everything like that, we don't pay attention to news and everything, because we know some other race is making all decisions for us. We don't have to worry about a plane crashing into our city, because we know somewhere on the line somebody's trained to make sure that doesn't happen to us. All the things of captivity. If someone's in a zoo, a lion in a zoo, he doesn't have to worry about starving or going out there starving. He knows that the zoo handler will come and give him his meat and everything. But take that same lion, put him out there on his own and whatnot, he wouldn't know what to do. He would have to learn all over again as an instinct to survive. America, black people in America is like the caged lion. We're in a state of captivity. And like I always say, militancy is a slave and prisoner of captivity. Those who are militant are in captivity. If you were not in captivity, you wouldn't be so militant. You would just be doing the things naturally, and you'd be living in peace and happiness and thriving. You know what I'm saying?
Can I ask? I agree on that. I do, and I would like to add to that. because this is something that I have come into contact with studying military history and strategy again. And that is that, you know, you have a lot of people who think militancy is a way of life and is forever. You have a lot of people who think that revolution never ends. Revolution for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of people that they are deaf to a new nation, because if you study the rise and fall of any nation that was overthrown by a revolution, generally what ends up happening is the revolution are what's first of all called the insurgency. They're the gentlemen and the women that, you know, hide amongst the people, and then they come out and they perform guerrilla tactics and things like that. They're anti-government, and eventually they overthrow the government. Once that happens, the big problem is, what do we do with these people? Because all they know how to do is overthrow government.
Yeah, the French Revolution was a perfect example of what you're saying. You know, the French had like a 30-year bloody history. The French Revolution was a real revolution. It wasn't like the American Revolution. The American Revolution was a fight between two aristocrat classes, the American aristocrats and the British aristocrats. The French Revolution really was the peasantry and everything rising up and couldn't stand the aristocracy. It became so bloody and everything, and so all it knew how to do was destroy in the name of the revolution. It began killing its own self. It began killing its own self. You know? So you're absolutely right about that. People were professional revolutionaries.
Can I ask a question? How many brothers have been in the military or been in the service?
Rob?
Rob, let me ask you something. When you go through basic training, the purpose of going through basic training, right, is to establish your skill set, right? Because after you go through basic training, don't they assign you to a particular part of the Army?
Rob, you on?
Well, I don't know if Rob is on, but
he got cut off.
I was in the military. Yeah, I was in the military. And actually, basic training is to divorce you from what you were before. That is what basic training is. And then they have a thing that's called advanced individual training, where you get your skill set. But before,
how do they determine where you, like, I noticed that, like, some people will go to infantry, some people will go to different aspects like communication. How do they determine which person goes to what?
Well, you're tested before you join, and you, based on your test, you have a range of jobs that you can fill. If you barely make it this grade, your range of jobs is going to be infantry and infantry. You can pick up a gun and you can go shoot.
Right.
If you're high level, you can do everything up until, you know, military intelligence. You know what I'm saying?
Now, do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I got you.
Hey, Money?
I mean, there has to be something in place to learn how to assess skills so that people are put in the positions where they can do what they want to do or what they're trained. You see, what the problem is, and I've made this point before, we don't have any organized nations. So what you got is an open mic where everybody's on the mic. You don't hear, in the United States of America, you do not hear generals giving speeches to the general population. That would be a disaster.
Right.
But in our nation, the generals get up on the mic and they can say whatever the hell they want to say, and it's so diplomatically.
And now that the generals are making decisions. The generals are making decisions. Let's go kill crackers. Let's go blow this, that, other thing. And the bottom line is, those of us who are diplomatic and educated and everything, they will say, "Wait a minute here. You know, that's the job of an elected administration thing." That's
exactly.
What I'm saying. We want the idea. We want to talk about nation, but there's no structure because there's no consequences for anybody. What people do is everybody's doing their own thing.
Exactly, and that's the reason why I've always
will give us structure. You know?
I've always made this example using, like, I don't demonize any aspect of our nation. It's just that we have to put things in its proper perspective. If, let's say that in Africa, in America, Africans here in America, during the time of the 60s, we had a functional nation. Martin Luther King would have been our diplomat, and Malcolm X would have been our general.
Yep.
That's it. Yep. It's not like one. So this discussion about who was right and who was better, and that's ridiculous. Each one had a role to serve within the context of the nation. So I'm going to tell you, I love Khalid Muhammad. Love that man. I met him personally. I've been around him. Love him. But Khalid Muhammad is a general. You don't put a general on the microphone talking to the general population. The general should be talking to soldiers.
Right.
You know, I met him also, and he used to be the supreme captain of the Nation of Islam back then. And, you know, so it's like, and that's the one thing that I would give you context with when it comes to that particular paradigm. You know, I've been a captain, I've been a lieutenant, but for the most part, I've been a minister. There's a different mentality for both. And generally, the one mentality doesn't cross the other. I mean, we have a cliche, and a cliche says that, you know, a good captain is a good minister, but the reality situation is a captain thinks completely different than a minister, completely different. And you do not want your captain in front of the people, you know, like, say, for instance, Khalid was at the Million Man March. Like, that message would have been completely different, y'all. Completely different. It would have been rough, rugged. A lot of people would have wanted to hear it, but at the same time, it would have been completely different. Because he would have been like, yo, damn, crackers are going to die today. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a completely different conversation. Listen, brothers, we're out of time. It's only 5 minutes left, and I'm going to go to sleep. Hopefully we can have this discussion next week. I really, really love what we talked about today. Is everybody down to have this discussion? Can we get some more people on, Brother Holden, from the organization, or?
Excuse me? I didn't hear you.
I said, can we get some more people from the organization next week?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. And also, I just want to, like, once we tie it up, I just want to make sure that Brother Earl and us are on the same page, because we actually are. So that's what gives me great joy and endiness, knowing that there's no big contrast between what he's saying and what we're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd rather have that. I'd rather have that discussion in an independent nation. And people can say whatever they want. We ultimately know that we're in the same boat. We're on a ship. We're on a ship sailing, right? You know, we're on the same boat. If somebody says something, we know that, hey, look, if we don't get this right, we're going to sink. You know, right now it's like, you know, everybody doing their own thing and everything like that. There's no consequences. So when you come on nation building, a nation state, and everything like that, when we start building like that, formation starts happening where everybody starts getting their roles. You know, if somebody basically is about military, and somebody's about diplomacy, somebody's about economy, somebody's about science, whatever like that, everybody would have a role. Somebody's about education, whatever like that. Everybody should have their role to do, you know, just to do, because we are the ones that are making decisions about everything that goes on in that nation, everything.
All right. Get some sleep, Brother Minister.
Yeah, bro. Thanks for having the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for coming on, man. And I really respect y'all. I will see y'all next Saturday. And next Saturday we're gonna. What's the topic that we discussing next Saturday again? Because I know you've been coming out with a lot of different topics.
Oh, I came up with a few of them. I think the last one I came up with is what type of government would we have in our nation?
Yeah, and I got a lot of
stuff
to add to that. I got a lot of stuff to add to that, you know.
Here's my topic, man. What goes good with grits?
That too. We can talk about that. All right, brothers.
Okay, brother.
All right. Take it easy.
All right, peace.